there is a book that popes tried to burn. A text that kings considered too dangerous to circulate freely among the people. A manual so disturbing in its honesty that its author had his name transformed into an adjective Machiavellian synonymous with cruel manipulation and unscrupulous calculation. But what if I told you that this demonization was intentional? That those in power did not fear Machiavelli's immorality, but rather his brutal honesty? That the prince doesn't teach how to be cruel, but rather reveals how power really works, and has always worked, behind the veneer of virtue that the powerful perform publicly? The most dangerous truth that Niccolò Machiavelli revealed was not that cruelty is sometimes necessary. It was something far more disturbing, that those who achieve and maintain wealth and power rarely do so through the virtues they preach to the masses. Hard work, honesty, fairness, patience, these are excellent virtues for creating obedient and predictable citizens. Not to create conquerors. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513, after being tortured and exiled by a regime that seized power in Florence. He had served the Florentine Republic for 14 years, watching from within how power is conquered, held, and lost. And then, stripped of everything, he distilled these observations into a manuscript of brutal clarity. What makes Machiavelli different from other political philosophers is simple: he completely abandoned the question of how power should work and focused exclusively on how it actually works. Not idealized morality, but observable reality. And here's the problem you face: you were raised in a society that fed you the idealized version. Be good and good things will happen. Honesty is the best policy. The universe rewards virtue. And then you look around and see less ethical, less hardworking, less deserving people accumulating wealth while you remain stagnant, confused about why the rules you've been taught don't produce the promised results. The answer is simple and uncomfortable: you're playing a game by the rules you've been taught, while those who win play by the real rules, the rules Machiavelli had the courage to document. Throughout this video, we're going to do something that few have the stomach to do: examine Machiavelli's 5 most brutal laws on acquiring wealth and power, not through the lens of moral judgment, but through the lens of strategic effectiveness. I'm not going to tell you if these laws are good or bad. I'll show you how they work, why they work, and how they're being applied right now, in this moment, by those who accumulate wealth as you watch. And I leave you with a warning: this knowledge is deeply disturbing to those invested in believing that the world is fundamentally just. If you have to believe that wealth is distributed meritocratically, this video will destroy that illusion. But if you're ready to see the game as it's actually played, keep going. Machiavellian Law 1: it's better to be feared than loved. If you can't be both, hence the question arises, whether it is better to be loved than feared, or the other way around. The answer is that it would be desirable to be both, but as it is difficult to unite the two, it is much safer to be feared than loved, when one has to fail at one of the two. This is perhaps Machiavelli's most famous statement. And it is massively misunderstood. He is not advocating gratuitous cruelty. He's making a cold observation about the mechanics of power. Love is volatile, based on the fickle feelings of others. Fear is structural, based on predictable consequences. Why does this law work? Because love and admiration are emotions that depend on continuous performance. The moment you fail to meet expectations, disappoint, or simply stop delivering value, love evaporates. People who loved you instantly disappear when you're no longer useful. Fear, on the other hand, is based on respect for consequences, not feelings. A person may not like you, they may even hate you, but if they understand that crossing you results in certain negative consequences, they will behave accordingly. Thomas Hobbes, another realist philosopher, understood this when he wrote that in the state of nature, without authority, human life is solitary, poor, sordid, brutish, and short. Not because humans are inherently evil, but because without structural consequences for misconduct, incentives naturally lead to chaos. Machiavelli applied this principle to the acquisition of wealth: if your prosperity depends on the volatile goodwill of others, you are building on sand. If it depends on structures where crossing you have clear and certain consequences, you have built on rock. Let me tell you the story that Machiavelli himself used to illustrate this principle: Cesare Borgia and the pacification of Romagna. In 1499, Cesare Borgia, the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI, was sent to reconquer the Romagna region of Italy, which had fallen into anarchy under corrupt and brutal local governors. The population suffered under petty tyrants who stole, tortured, and killed with impunity. Cesare arrived with army and strength, but he understood something crucial: if he himself ruled with visible brutality, he would be hated. But if he tried to rule only with kindness, he would be seen as weak and would quickly lose control. So he did something brilliant and brutal. He appointed a man named Ramiro de Orco as his governor, a man known for efficient ruthlessness. Ramiro was given full authority to restore order by any means necessary. And Ramiro did just that. For months, he punished crimes violently, executed thugs publicly, and implemented law through absolute fear. Romagna was quickly pacified. Order has been restored. But the population began to fear and hate Ramiro. At the perfect moment, when order was established but before resentment became dangerous, Cesare acted. One morning, the citizens of Cesena, the capital of Romagna, woke up to find the body of Ramiro de Orco cut in two in the public square, with a bloody knife next to it. Cesare sent a clear message: the brutality you suffered was not mine, but Ramiro's. I punished the tyrant. I brought justice. The result? The population of Romagna came to see Cesare as a liberator, not an oppressor. He got all the benefits of brutal governance: order restored, crimes eliminated, authority established, but avoided the political cost of being seen as the perpetrator. Machiavelli personally observed this as a Florentine diplomat and was simultaneously horrified and impressed. Cesare had understood something profound: you can use fear structurally while cultivating love performatively. You see this principle constantly operating in the modern corporate world, but in more subtle ways. Consider how large companies implement mass layoffs. The CEO never announces it in person. He hires an outside consulting firm, McKinsey, BCG, Bain, that does the analysis and recommends cuts. Consulting becomes the villain. The CEO then announces that, reluctantly and after careful third-party review, cuts are necessary. The CEO gets all the benefits: reduced costs, increased efficiency, high stock price, but avoids being seen as ruthless. The consultancy absorbs the hatred and disappears after receiving its payment. Or observe successful entrepreneurs. Publicly, they perform generosity and values. Elon Musk talks about saving humanity. Jeff Bezos talks about customer obsession. But structurally, both have built organizations where crossing them or failing to deliver results has immediate and certain consequences. Amazon is famous for its stack ranking process where the bottom percentage of employees are systematically eliminated. This creates structural fear: you perform poorly and you're out. That ensures performance independent of personal feelings about Bezos. The general population loves these figures, or at least admires them. Officials fear them. And this, as Machiavelli predicted, is the optimal combination for maintaining power. Tactic 1. Never depend on the emotional goodwill of others for your economic security. If you're an employee, don't trust that your boss likes you. Ensure that you are indispensable through critical skills, key relationships, or institutional knowledge. If you're an entrepreneur, don't build businesses based on customer loyalty. Build through structural lock-in, switching costs, network effects, technical dependencies. Tactic 2. When you need to do something unpopular but necessary, fire someone, cut costs, raise prices, create a buffer of responsibility. Market analysis has shown that. Consultants recommended. Regulatory changes require. You maintain authority but deflect personal resentment. Can it sound Machiavellian? Absolutely. But notice, it's exactly what everyone around you with real power already does. Machiavellian Law 2, fortune favors the audacious, but only the prepared. I conclude, therefore, that fortune is changeable and men are obstinate in their manners, and so long as the two are in agreement men succeed, but fail when they come into conflict. Machiavelli had a nuanced vision of luck and timing. He embodied fortune as a wild woman: you can partially master it through preparation and daring, but never completely control it. The key is not to eliminate dependence on luck, but to position yourself to maximize gain when luck favors and minimize loss when it does not. There is a fundamental tension between two opposing errors in the pursuit of wealth, the paralytic and the foolhardy. The paralytic hopes for perfect conditions, complete certainty, zero risk. He plans endlessly but never acts. He studies the market, analyzes opportunities, waits for the right moment that never comes. He dies with unfulfilled potential, consoling himself that at least he did not fail. The foolhardy acts impulsively without preparation, confusing boldness with stupidity. He takes enormous risks on weak bases. He occasionally succeeds through sheer luck, but more often is destroyed. Machiavelli advocates a third way, meticulous preparation combined with audacious execution. You build capacity silently, observe patterns carefully, and then, when the opportunity presents itself, act with disproportionate speed and force. This requires two difficult psychological skills: patience during preparation and aggressiveness during execution. Most have one or the other, rarely both. Machiavelli often cited Francesco Sforza as a perfect example of this principle in action. Francesco was born in 1401 as the illegitimate son of a condottiero, a mercenary hired by Italian city-states to conduct their wars. He had no title, no land, no aristocratic legitimacy. All he had was military skill inherited from his father. For 20 years, Francesco worked as a mercenary, but unlike others, he did three things simultaneously. First, he cultivated a reputation not only for winning battles but for being trustworthy. In an era where mercenaries often switched sides or abandoned employers, Francesco always fulfilled contracts. This made him invaluable. Second, he meticulously studied the politics of each city-state for which he worked. He understood internal factions, ambitions of powerful families, weaknesses of rulers. He was building knowledge that would be crucial. Third, and most importantly, he amassed personal loyalty from his soldiers through consistent pay and competent leadership. He built not only an army, but an instrument of personal power. During those 20 years, he seemed simply like a successful mercenary. But it was building foundations. Then, in 1447, the opportunity came. The Duke of Milan died without a legitimate heir. Milan, one of Italy's richest and most powerful city-states, has descended into political chaos. Factions competed for power. The Ambrosian Republic was declared but quickly fragmented. Francesco, who had been a mercenary from Milan, saw the opening. He had the army. He had the internal political knowledge. He had the reputation. In an audacious move, he laid siege to Milan and cut off food supplies until the city surrendered. In 1450, Francesco Sforza, the bastard son of a mercenary, became Duke of Milan. He founded a dynasty that would rule for 50 years. Machiavelli pointed to Francesco as a perfect example: 20 years of patient preparation, then audacious action at the exact moment of opportunity. This pattern is constantly repeated in modern wealth. Consider investors like Warren Buffett. Buffett is famous for waiting for opportunities. He holds billions in cash for years, refusing to invest when markets are overvalued. This seems conservative, even passive. But then, when crisis strikes, 2008, 2020, he acts with massive aggression, investing billions in undervalued companies while others are paralyzed by fear. Your patience is not passivity. It is preparation for asymmetric action. Or consider tech entrepreneurs who have been working on secret startups for years. To the outside world, they disappeared. But they are building product, testing the market, refining business models quietly. Then, when they launch, they explode with speed that seems to come out of nowhere. Instagram was built in 2 years of preparation before launching. It reached 1 million users in 2 months and was sold to Facebook for $1 billion 2 years later. The luck of perfect timing was actually a result of observing social media adoption patterns, quietly building superior technology, and then executing aggressive marketing launch at just the right time. Tactic 1. Develop what I call asymmetrical preparation. Identify 2 to 3 big potential opportunities in your life: a career change, a side deal, a specific investment. For each, do quiet preparation without committing total resources. Learn the skill, build the network, gather the capital, but don't execute completely. When one of these opportunities matures, market indicators align, timing gets right, you can act with speed that others can't match because you've already done 90% of the work. Tactic 2. Create dry powder, uncommitted resources that you can mobilize quickly when opportunity arises. This can be money in a savings account, to invest when markets fall, unallocated time, ability to work intensely when the right project comes along, or even emotional energy, not draining yourself into unimportant dramas to focus when important happens. Most are always fully committed, so when opportunity arises, they don't have the resources to capture it. Machiavellian Law 3. Appearance of virtue is more useful than real virtue. It is not necessary for a prince to have all the good qualities mentioned, but it is very necessary to appear to have them. I would even go so far as to say that having them and always practicing them is harmful, and appearing to have them is helpful. This is perhaps Machiavelli's most disturbing statement. He is not saying that virtue is completely useless. It's saying something more subtle and more dangerous. Virtue performance is strategically more valuable than consistent virtue practice, because the world judges by appearances, and actual virtue often puts you at a disadvantage against unscrupulous opponents. Why does appearance surpass reality in the realm of power? Because humans are fundamentally creatures of perception, not objective truth. We operate based on what we believe to be true, not what is true. And forming beliefs requires cognitive effort, so most people take shortcuts, judging by superficial signs, appearances, performances. Someone who is genuinely generous but doesn't communicate that generosity gets zero credit. Someone who is selfish but performatively generous in visible moments gets maximum credit. The cruel irony is that the genuine often fails to gain recognition, while the performative thrives. And here's the truly Machiavellian part: consistent virtue makes you predictable. If you're known for always telling the truth, always keeping promises, always acting honorably, smart people can manipulate you through their own virtues. They know exactly how you will react. You have become a tool of your principles, not a master of them. Machiavelli argued that the truly effective leader must have moral flexibility calibrated to the circumstances, appearing to be consistent virtue but able to indulge in evil when necessary. There is no more perfect example of this law than Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI in 1492. Rodrigo bought the papacy through brazen bribery, a common but usually covert practice. He had multiple illegitimate children openly acknowledged, including Cesare and Lucrezia Borgia. He lived in obscene opulence while preaching Christian poverty. He ordered assassinations, betrayed allies, lied consistently. By any measure of genuine Christian virtue, he was monstrous. But here's the fascinating thing: he held papal power for 11 years and died of natural causes, rare for corrupt popes of that era, because he fully understood the law of virtuous appearance. Publicly, Alexander performed piety with theatrical mastery. Their masses were elaborate demonstrations of devotion. He wept when he spoke of Christ's suffering. He embraced lepers, on carefully staged occasions where the risk was minimal. He commissioned sublime religious art and financed church renovations. To the common people and even many within the church, he seemed like a devout pope working diligently for Christendom. Scandals were whispered but not definitively proven during his lifetime. More importantly, Alexander understood that the performance of virtue should be public and dramatic, while non-virtuous actions should be private and deniable. When he ordered the murder of rivals, it was done discreetly by intermediaries. When he bribed cardinals, it was through gifts and favors that could technically be interpreted as legitimate papal generosity. Compare that to an honest contemporary, Girolamo Savonarola, the Dominican monk who preached against papal corruption with brutal honesty. Savonarola was genuinely virtuous, genuinely devout, genuinely committed to moral reform. He was burned at the stake in 1498, just 6 years after Alexander became pope. His uncompromising honesty made him an enemy of all the powerful in Florence. He did not know how to perform, negotiate, dissimulate. His real virtue was his destruction. Alexander, with his performative virtues and hidden vices, prospered. This principle is more relevant now than ever, especially in the age of social media where performance is everything. Consider modern corporate philanthropy. Companies that exploit workers, aggressively avoid taxes, and ruthlessly destroy competitors simultaneously donate small fractions of profits to visible and widely publicized causes. Amazon pays zero in federal taxes a few years through legal loopholes, while Jeff Bezos donates to visible causes and gets headlines of generous billionaire. The donation is minimal compared to the total wealth, but maximally visible. Tax evasion is massive but technically legal and minimally understood by the public. Or consider influencers who carefully cultivate an image of authenticity, vulnerability, and moral values. While every post is calculated to maximize engagement, every spontaneous moment is staged, every value is tested for audience resonance. The person who is genuinely authentic but doesn't know how to communicate that authenticity, doesn't know lighting, angles, editing, storytelling, is surpassed by the one who performs authenticity with technical mastery. In the corporate world, the CEO who works 100 hours a week but doesn't perform visibility receives less recognition than the CEO who works 50 hours but ensures that every hour is visible through social media posts, conference appearances, and media interviews. Tactic 1. Develop what I call strategic virtuosity. Identify the 3 to 4 virtues most valued in your context. In technology it can be innovation and vision, in finance it can be prudence and integrity, in media it can be authenticity and courage. Then, consciously construct public performance of these virtues through stories, symbols, and visible demonstrations. This does not mean abandoning private ethics, it means recognizing that perception requires active communication, not just passive action. Tactic 2. Rigidly separate public performance from private performance. Its virtues must be visible, communicated, performed in public contexts. Their difficult decisions, pragmatic compromises, and morally ambiguous actions should be private, discreet, and if possible, structurally deniable. This may sound hypocritical, and technically it is, but Machiavelli would argue that functionality trumps moral purity when the goal is to accumulate power in an imperfect world. Stop and consider what we've established so far. These are not philosophical abstractions. They are operational principles drawn from brutal observation of how power actually works. You've learned that structural fear is more reliable than volatile love for position keeping. You have understood that luck favors not audacious fools or cautious paralytics, but patiently prepared ones who act with disproportionate aggression when opportunity arises. And you found that the world rewards virtue performance more reliably and generously than quiet practice of real virtue. These are fundamentals. This is his literacy in Machiavellian realism. But literacy is not mastery. Now we have entered even more dangerous territory. The final 2 laws are not about defense or preparation. They are about active manipulation of the reality around you. They are about how those who truly master the game not only react to the environment, but actively redesign it for asymmetrical advantage. And these laws require something that the first 3 do not, a willingness to deceive not occasionally in times of need, but systematically as a central strategy. Willingness to see allies as temporary instruments. Willingness to break rules that everyone else respects. If you still cling to the idea that you can achieve extraordinary wealth by being completely ethical in conventional terms, these next 2 laws will shatter that illusion. But they will also free you to see the game as it is played by those who win. Continue only if you're ready for that level of brutal honesty. Machiavellian Law 4, injuries must be done all at once, benefits little by little. Injuries should be done all at once, so that, being less experienced, they offend less. The benefits should be granted little by little, so that they may be better appreciated. This is perhaps the law most directly applicable to the accumulation of wealth. Machiavelli is describing a profound psychological asymmetry. Acute but brief pain is preferable to prolonged and uncertain pain. Gratitude is maximized through strategic distribution, not massive one-time generosity. Why does this asymmetry exist? Because the human mind adapts quickly to new realities, a phenomenon psychologists call hedonic adaptation. If you inflict 10 units of pain spread over 10 months, the person experiences 10 months of suffering and resentment. If you inflict the same 10 units at once, the person experiences a month of acute distress, but then adapts to the new normal. Conversely, if you grant 10 units of benefit at once, the person experiences intense initial gratitude that quickly normalizes. They begin to feel that they deserve that level. But if you spread 1 unit a month for 10 months, you create 10 separate moments of gratitude and keep the person in a continuous state of anticipation and appreciation. This is not an opinion. It is a verifiable psychological principle studied extensively in behavioral economics, particularly by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in their research on perspective theory. Machiavelli did not have access to modern psychological studies. He simply observed human behavior with brutal acuity and distilled patterns. Let me bring this into absolutely contemporary context that you may have witnessed. When companies are acquired or undergo restructuring, there is a pattern that repeats itself with almost scientific precision. In the first 3 to 6 months under new management, massive layoffs happen. Entire departments are eliminated. Benefits are cut. Offices are closed. It's brutal, fast-paced, and comprehensive. This sounds cruel, and it is, but it is strategically efficient. All organizational pain is concentrated in a short period. Remaining employees experience intense but brief fear. They think, "I survived the worst." And then, slowly over the next 1 to 2 years, small benefits are reintroduced. A modest bonus. A monthly happy hour. Training budget restored. Updated equipment. Each of these small benefits generates a wave of disproportionate gratitude because it is coming after a period of scarcity. In the end, the company may be offering 80% of the original benefits, but operating costs are 70% because headcount has been permanently reduced. And the remaining employees often feel more positive about the company than they did before the acquisition because they have experienced recovery and improvement, even if the objective situation is worse. Compare that to a company that tries to be nice, making small cuts spread over 2 years, trying to minimize pain. They create an environment of chronic uncertainty where no one knows if the next cut is coming. Morale collapses completely. Talented employees leave preemptively. Kindness creates worse outcomes. Machiavelli predicted this perfectly 500 years ago. It applies to practically all dimensions of wealth accumulation. Consider salary negotiations. The smart employer never offers everything at once. They start with a conservative base salary, then grant signing bonuses after some negotiation. Then they add benefits such as remote work. So they improve the offer with stock options. Each grant creates separate gratitude moment, even if the total package was what they were willing to offer from the beginning. The naive employee does the opposite. He asks for everything he wants immediately in a long list of demands. Even if you achieve everything, there is only one moment of victory, followed by rapid normalization. Or consider entrepreneurs launching products. The smart launch takes place in early access with reduced price and limited features. Bugs and issues are concentrated in this early phase with users who have logged in knowing that it is beta. Then, over the course of months, each new feature is advertised as an improvement and a value addition, creating a continuous narrative of progress and generosity. The naive entrepreneur tries to launch a perfect product with all the features from the beginning. Even if it succeeds, there is only one moment of impression. And any problem is seen as catastrophic failure because expectations have been set so high. Even in personal investments, this principle operates. The sophisticated investor concentrates all losses in a single admission during tax season. "I had a bad year," then distributes earnings communication over time. "This investment is performing well, so is that one." Psychologically, this creates a narrative of recovery and success, even if the net result is modest. Tactic 1. When you need to implement negative changes, raise prices, reduce services, cut costs, eliminate benefits, do it all simultaneously in a restructuring package. Don't spread it out over time, it just prolongs pain and resentment. Accept that there will be a period of intense negative reaction, but trust that adaptation will come. Then, after stabilization, start reintroducing small improvements strategically. Tactic 2. When you offer value, whether it's salary, services, benefits, or gifts. Never give it all at once, even if you can easily do so. Create a value escalation structure where you start with a solid but conservative foundation, then add increments over time. Each addition must be explicitly communicated as an improvement or addition. This isn't gratuitous manipulation, it's recognition of how human psychology really works. People genuinely appreciate more through temporal distribution than single delivery, even if total quantity is identical. Machiavellian Law 5. Keep other dependents, but never be dependent. Men have less scruples in offending one who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared. For love is maintained by a bond of obligation which men, being evil, break off at any opportunity of self-gain, but the fear is maintained by the fear of punishment that never fails. But Machiavelli goes further on this lesser-sided but equally crucial principle: a prudent prince should base himself on what is his own, not on what is others. The synthesis of these ideas forms the fifth law: your security and prosperity must depend on structures you control, while the prosperity of others must depend on you. Asymmetry of dependence is asymmetry of power. This is perhaps the most structurally important law for sustainable wealth. Consider the fundamental math: if you need someone more than they need you, they have leverage. If they need you more than you need them, you have leverage. And leverage, in the end, determines who extracts value and who delivers value in any transaction or relationship. Economist Ronald Coase won a Nobel Prize partly for theorizing about transaction costs and why companies exist. One answer he identified: companies reduce dependence on individual market transactions through vertical integration and long-term contracts. In other words, successful companies systematically reduce their own dependence while increasing dependence on others on them. Amazon began as a retailer dependent on book suppliers. It gradually built Amazon Web Services, becoming a provider of internet infrastructure that millions of businesses depend on. It has built a marketplace where millions of sellers depend on its platform. It built Prime, where millions of consumers have high cost of exit due to the built-in convenience. Every strategic move by Amazon over 25 years can be interpreted through this lens: reducing dependence on oneself, increasing dependence on others. Let's go back to the Medici of Florence, but this time examining not how they made money, but how they ensured that no one could challenge them. In the 15th century, the Medici were not just wealthy bankers. Dozens of families in Florence were wealthy. What made the Medici special was how they systematically created dependency while eliminating their own. First, they became the Pope's bankers. This meant that the most powerful institution in Christian Europe depended on them for money transfers, loans, and financial management. But note, the Medici have diversified completely. They didn't rely solely on the Pope, they had dozens of other high-value customers. The Pope, conversely, could not easily switch bankers without exposing complex finances to new unreliable intermediaries. Second, they strategically lent money to virtually all of Florence's noble families. Not through impersonal banking, but through personal relationships where the lender knew the debtor's finances intimately. Each noble family owed money to the Medici. But the Medici structured their finances to never owe anyone substantially. Third, they controlled access to political positions through patronage. If you wanted a position in the Florentine government, you needed Medici support. But the Medici didn't rely on any individual politician, they had a network of supporters who could replace each other. Fourth, and more subtle, they diversified geographically. Medici banks operated in Rome, Venice, Bruges, London, Lyon. If any city became hostile, they could operate from another. But each city depended on Medici financial services for international trade. The result? For several generations, the Medici were effectively untouchable in Florence. Not because they were richer than everyone else combined, they weren't. But because the network of dependency they created meant that attacking the Medici would hurt virtually every other powerful actor. When they were finally expelled in 1494, it was only because they had made a critical mistake: they had become dependent on a specific alliance with France that collapsed. They violated their own rule of non-dependency, and paid the price. This principle is being applied now, at this time, on a massive scale. Consider technology ecosystems. Apple doesn't just sell iPhones. It creates an ecosystem where your iPhone integrates with iPad, MacBook, Apple Watch, AirPods, and services like iCloud. The more Apple products you have, the higher the cost of output. Your data, apps, and integrations all depend on the ecosystem. You become dependent on Apple. But Apple? It has billions of customers. Losing you is statistically irrelevant. Perfect asymmetry. Or consider a modern SaaS, software as a service, model. Companies no longer sell software that you install and own. They sell subscriptions to software hosted on their servers. This creates structural dependency. You can't just own the software, you're perpetually renting access. And here's the brilliant thing, the best SaaS companies integrate deeply into customer workflows. Salesforce becomes the system of record for all customer relationships. Slack becomes a communication channel for the entire company. Stripe processes all payments. Switching any of these services requires massive migration, retraining of teams, and risk of data loss. Customers become structurally dependent. But the SaaS vendor has thousands of customers and can lose any one without collapsing. On the individual level, you see it in careers. The intelligent professional develops skills that are in demand by multiple potential employers. It never becomes so specialized in one employer's proprietary systems that it cannot transfer to another. He maintains an active network of professional contacts. He has diversified sources of income. The naive professional becomes an expert in the specific systems of his current employer, depends completely on a salary, and lets the network atrophy. It created maximum dependency on a single point of failure. Tactic 1. Systematically audit your dependencies. Create an honest list. What/who do you depend on for income? For customers? For critical skills? For essential features? Every single dependency is strategic vulnerability. Your goal should be to have a minimum of 3 viable alternatives for each critical dependency. If you're employed, cultivate skills that are in demand across multiple industries. If you're an entrepreneur, make sure that no single customer accounts for more than 20% of revenue. If you're an investor, diversify not just within asset classes, but between completely different asset classes. Tactic 2. Systematically build dependence on others and you. How? Becoming indispensable through unique knowledge, exclusive relationships, or control of critical resources. In the corporate context, this means having relationships with key customers that only you have, knowing systems that only you understand, or having skills that are not easily replaceable. In business, it means creating products with a high cost of change, whether through network effects, deep integration, or proprietary data. The key is that your absence should create significant pain or cost for others, while the absence of any specific other creates minimal inconvenience for you. Tactic 3. Recognize that this law applies not only economically, but emotionally. People who are emotionally dependent on approval, validation, or affection from specific individuals or groups are vulnerable to manipulation. Develop emotional self-sufficiency not as isolation, but as diversification, multiple meaningful relationships, multiple sources of self-esteem, multiple identities. Machiavelli would apply the same principle. Don't depend on one person for happiness, but be someone from whom multiple people derive value. So we come to the end of this journey through the mind of Niccolò Machiavelli. And you're probably feeling a mix of emotions, maybe intellectual enlightenment, maybe moral discomfort, probably some unease about what those laws reveal about the real world. Let me be absolutely clear about something. I did not present these laws as moral prescriptions. I'm not saying you should live like this. I'm saying this is how the game really works, how it's been played for 500 years, and how it will continue to be played regardless of your approval. Machiavelli did not invent these dynamics. He simply had the courage to document them without moralizing disguises. And for that honesty, he was demonized for centuries. Recap of the 5 brutal laws. Law 1. It is better to be feared than loved. Fear is structural and reliable, love is emotional and volatile. Build your safety on predictable consequences, not on the fickle feelings of others. Law 2. Fortune favors the audacious prepared. Be neither paralyzed waiting for perfect certainty nor reckless acting impulsively. Prepare meticulously in silence, then execute with disproportionate aggressiveness when the right moment arrives. Law 3. Appearance of virtue trumps real virtue. The world judges by perceptions, not realities. Strategic performance of valued virtues generates more benefit than silent practice of genuine virtue. Separate public performance from private performance. Law 4. Inflict pain at once, distribute pleasure gradually. Human psychology adapts quickly to new realities. Concentrate costs, negative changes, and sacrifices in a short period of time. Distribute benefits, improvements, and rewards over time to maximize gratitude. Law 5. Create asymmetrical dependency. Your prosperity must depend on structures that you control and are diverse. Prosperity of others must depend on you and be concentrated. Leverage comes from dependency asymmetry. But here is the final paradox that Machiavelli himself recognized but is rarely discussed. These laws work magnificently for the acquisition of wealth and power, but they do not guarantee happiness or meaning. Cesare Borgia, the quintessential Machiavellian hero, died at the age of 31 in obscurity, betrayed and abandoned, his territories lost, his power evaporated. Alexander VI, the perfectly Machiavellian pope, is remembered as one of the worst popes in history. The Medici amassed unimaginable wealth but lived in constant paranoia, never knowing who genuine allies versus opportunists were. Machiavelli was describing mechanics of power, not a recipe for life well lived. And this distinction is absolutely critical. You now have knowledge that most don't, brutal clarity on how wealth accumulation actually works. And with that knowledge comes fundamental choice. Option 1. You can reject these laws altogether, call them immoral and cynical, and commit to living up to conventional virtues regardless of economic cost. This is a completely valid choice. Many people live satisfying and meaningful lives without accumulating extraordinary wealth. But be honest about trade-off. You're choosing values over effectiveness, and that's noble but has material consequences. Option 2. You can embrace these laws fully, applying them without moral restraint in pursuit of maximum wealth and power. You will likely succeed economically. But be prepared for psychological costs, instrumentalized relationships, paranoia about others' motivations, emotional isolation, and eventual questioning of whether hoarding was worth it. Option 3, and this is the hardest but perhaps wisest option, you can understand these laws perfectly, apply them selectively in appropriate contexts, but maintain moral core that guides when to apply them and when not to. Use asymmetric leverage in trades but not in close friendships. Perform virtue in professional contexts but be genuine in private circle. Build asymmetric dependence in the market but genuine interdependence in the family. This third way requires extraordinary moral sophistication, the ability to see the world with Machiavellian realism but not be consumed by cynicism. It requires what philosopher Isaiah Berlin called pluralism of values, recognition that different domains of life operate by different principles, and wisdom lies in navigating between them appropriately. Machiavelli's last lesson. There is a letter that Machiavelli wrote years after being tortured and exiled, living in poverty on a small rural property. In it, he describes his daily routine. During the day, he worked on his land, talked to local peasants, played cards in taverns. In the evenings, he would wash himself, put on his best clothes, and come into his studio to read the classics, Plato, Aristotle, Cicero. He wrote, "I feed on that food which is mine alone and for which I was born." This is the real Machiavelli, not the cynical monster of reputation, but a man who loved knowledge, who valued truth over comfort, who chose brutal honesty over comforting illusions. His real lesson is not be cruel and Machiavellian. It's see the world as it really is, not as you want it to be. And then, with open eyes, make your choices consciously. If this video disturbed you, good. Comfortable knowledge is rarely true knowledge. If it made you question beliefs about how wealth is distributed, excellent. Questioning is the beginning of real understanding. But don't stop here. Don't let this be just another video that you consume and forget. The 5 laws I've explored exist in depth that a single video can't fully capture. Read The Prince yourself. It's surprisingly short, it can be read in 3 hours. But read it not as a moral treatise, but as a manual of observation. Ask yourself, where do I see these dynamics operating in my life? In my workplace? In my investments? In political structures around me? And then, more importantly, consciously decide how you want to engage with these realities. Not through emotional reaction, but through careful deliberation about what kind of life you want to live and what price you are willing to pay. Machiavelli ended The Prince with an impassioned exhortation for the unification of Italy, a lofty moral goal after dozens of chapters of seemingly amoral pragmatic advice. This juxtaposition is instructive. Even Machiavelli, the supreme realist, recognized that techniques of power are tools, not ends. They can be used for noble or ignoble purposes. For creation or destruction. For lifting or exploration. The power of these 5 laws does not lie in their inherent morality or immorality. It is in its effectiveness. How you use that effectiveness, that's the test of your character. Then, my friend, the laws were revealed. The map was drawn. The choice of how to navigate this territory belongs entirely to you. Use this knowledge wisely. Use it consciously. And remember, Machiavelli was not demonized for teaching cruelty. He was demonized for revealing truths that the powerful preferred to keep hidden. You now possess these truths. What you do with them defines not only your future wealth, but the kind of person you will become in the process of acquiring it.